for this interaction. But do continue to stay on with me, Mr. Leong. We now move on, viewers. Let's also tell you that Chilean President Gabriel Boric has condemned the U.S. attack on Venezuela and capture of Maduro, warning about the precedent it could set. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has also condemned the attack. Sheinbaum said U.S.-Mexico relations are good and that her cabinet will assess Mexico's relationship with Venezuela if the U.S. takes over the country's administration. Let's in fact listen into what the two leaders have said.
Como Gobierno de Chile, manifestamos nuestra máxima preocupación y enérgica condena frente a las acciones militares que Estados Unidos ha estado desarrollando en Venezuela, ante el anuncio de que un Estado extranjero pretende ejercer un control directo sobre el territorio venezolano, administrar el país y eventualmente, como señaló su presidente, continuar operaciones militares hasta imponer una transición política. Esto sienta un precedente extremadamente...
Lo hemos manifestado, nosotros condenamos cualquier intervención y nos guiamos por lo que establece la Constitución. Esto es más allá incluso de la presidencia de Maduro. Tiene que ver con la política internacional, la ley internacional, las leyes internacionales, y tiene que ver con principios muy claros de la política exterior mexicana que nosotros defendemos. Y en ese marco es nuestra declaración de condena a esta intervención y vamos a seguir evaluando y a seguir pues manifestándonos en este sentido en los siguientes días.
All right, and I'll request Mr. Leong to join me back in the discussion here. Well, you heard those statements. Of course, certain nations are worried, as they should be. We're talking about Cuba, Colombia, Iran, but indeed a message must have been also sent to China. But should we expect it to do anything more than the condemnation that has come in?
Well, I don't think there is anything meaningful or substantial that other countries can do at present. As I said at the beginning, you can condemn their stark contravention of international laws and the U.S. Charter and a respect for other countries' sovereignty and so on and so forth. Until the cows come home, I don't think it's going to make any significant difference. Now, because Trump's strategy, as I said at the beginning, is the revival or a magnification of the Monroe Doctrine covering the Southern Hemisphere, as highlighted in the latest national security strategy. And of course, the Venezuela is only maybe the first chapter, and he's going to extend his influence. Maybe the next victim could be Cuba. And then what's left? I mean, there are countries which are not totally aligned with the United States, including Brazil. But Brazil is not anti-America, but on the other hand, is closely related to China, part of the BRICS, and also South Africa. But on the other hand, if Trump thinks that he's going to use his dominance, his hegemony, to cover all these countries into total submission, I think that he could be mistaken, because the simple fact remains that countries like Brazil, countries like South America, to a lesser extent, depend on China as the largest export market. I mean, what does Brazil export? Soybeans. And then, of course, it's a direct competitor with the United States. They can't sell soybeans to America. So I think this simple fact that the economic dependence of a number of large countries in South America.
But that's the thing, Mr. Leong. China has invested about $100 million in Venezuela, and that country is now under the U.S. hand. So should China be worried for all the investment that it has put on Venezuela?
Well, I think that, of course, if China wants to intervene, this is likely to lead into some sort of a kinetic war. I mean, what can China do thousands of miles away from South America? Let's not forget that China already thought about this a long time ago. I'm referring to the new Chinese port in Peru called the Chaney Port, CHAN. CAY, Chancay Port, on the western side of Peru. It is the largest port, is capable of handling 18,000 20 feet equivalent unit, the containers, much better, much bigger than the Panama Canal. This is to forestall. Already thought about it. Of course, it didn't happen all of a sudden. Forestall the possibility that the Panama Canal could be controlled by the United States. So I think China thought about this long and hard, long time ago already, and putting things in place. But it's not being pushed into immediate kinetic action. But of course, China is well able to defend itself, unlike other countries, having found a very effective countermeasure against Trump's coercion in the form of the rare earths, not just not the supplies, because you can find rare earth supplies in Ukraine, in Africa and other countries, but the processing, particularly processing of critical minerals like gallium. This single critical rare earth actually China controls the processing as much as something like 95%. And then if it's a critical usage is embedded in the United States, even the cutting edge military hardware like the F-35 fighters, and if China shuts down the rare earth supply chain, a lot of the American business will be affected. It's much more effective than a kinetic war. Nowadays, warfares are not just fought on the battlefield. Rivalry is not just fought on the battlefield. It's on supply chains, in economic dependence. As I said, I mean, this dependence dynamics also translate into the ability of countries in Latin America, like Brazil. In Brazil, as I said, I mean, sells the major products, agricultural products, soybeans. And then if the United States think they're going to Brazil to heal, obviously a lot of the people in Brazil would be affected, and that would translate into an anti-colonial movement again. So I think that this was now seeing a paradigm shift in the international relations. As I said, all the condemning in the world is not going to make a single difference, because the United Nations, in spite of its good work, in spite of the original purpose, has now lost its influence. And the Security Council is already been hijacked by a single veto of this legacy of the Second World War of the 5 permanent members. So again, this flags up on the need to reform the international order, to reform the United Nations. But that's a long-term project. Meanwhile, I think that it's very dangerous for countries to jump into an immediate reaction. Mindful of all these complicated dynamics which I've outlined.
No, thank you very much for all those points. Very insightful, and it's a great discussion with you, Mr. Leong. And with that, viewers, we're now going to proceed